Welcome to our deep dive. And today we're tackling something that might seem basic at first, but trust me, it's way more important than you think. We're diving into vocabulary instruction, particularly for all of you out there who are Indian students learning English.
Yeah.
And, I think we often get so caught up in the complexities of grammar rules and perfect sentences that we kind of forget the heart of it all, right? The words themselves.
Absolutely. And, it's interesting because you can actually communicate quite effectively, even with imperfect grammar, but without vocabulary. Well, you're stuck. You just can't get your message across.
It's true. It's like trying to build a house without bricks. The words are the very foundation of any language.
Right. And, for Indian students learning English, this is especially crucial because you're operating in a world where English is everywhere in education, in the workplace, even in social situations.
Exactly. It's your key to unlocking so many opportunities. And, it's fascinating. Even renowned linguists like Scott Thornbury emphasize this. They argue that mastering words and expressions should actually come before those strict grammar rules.
It's about understanding how language really works in everyday life. It's about being able to use words effectively to express yourself.
And here's something that might surprise you. Research has actually shown that even a limited word list can be incredibly powerful. There's this guy, Michael West, a pioneer in language learning. He created a list of just 1,200 words that he believed could express almost anything in English.
Really? Just 1,200? That's amazing.
It is, right? It's like having a secret code to unlock the language, and that's what we're going to explore today. Practical strategies for mastering English vocabulary, focusing on those key aspects that really make a difference for all of you.
One of the things we often miss is that learning vocabulary isn't just about memorizing definitions from a dictionary.
It's more than that.
It's so much more. It's about understanding the whole word, its sound, its spelling, how its meaning can change in different situations.
It's like each word has its own personality, right? And to use it correctly, you need to get to know it, understand its quirks.
Precisely. And speaking of quirks, let's start with pronunciation because, for you guys, pronunciation can be especially tricky because some of the sounds in English just don't exist in your native languages.
Oh, I remember struggling with that myself when I was learning new languages. It's so important, especially those tricky stress patterns. The same word can have a totally different meaning depending on where you put the emphasis. Like, remember, content versus content.
Exactly. Content is what's inside something, while content means feeling satisfied just by shifting the stress. The whole meaning changes.
And thankfully, we have so many resources available now, like online dictionaries from Oxford and Cambridge. They're lifesavers.
They are, and they can really help you with those tricky pronunciations. Now let's move on to another area that can be a bit of a headache: spelling. English spelling is notorious for being, well, a little crazy sometimes, isn't it?
Oh, tell me about it. There are so many silent letters and exceptions to the rules. It's enough to make your head spin.
Right. Like, think about advice and advise. They sound almost the same, but their meanings and spellings are completely different.
And then you've got the differences between British and American English spellings, too. As Indian students, you might come across both. So it's good to be aware of those variations.
Absolutely. It's all part of the wonderful messiness of the English language. But of course, understanding a word's meaning is essential, but it's not enough to just memorize the dictionary definition. You need to understand how that meaning can change based on the context.
Context. Like how cats and dogs can sometimes mean pouring rain instead of actual animals. I remember that one confused me for a while.
Exactly. It's a perfect example of how context shapes meaning. And, this is where understanding grammar becomes really useful.
Grammar?
Yeah, because knowing a word's grammatical function, whether it's a noun, a verb, an adjective, it helps you use it correctly in a sentence.
So grammar isn't just about rules. It's about understanding how words fit together to create meaning.
That's a great way to put it. It's like the glue that hold everything together. Grammar helps you figure out which prepositions to use with certain words, like interested in something rather than interested at. And it helps us understand those tricky inflections and derivations where you can change a word's form by adding prefixes and suffixes.
It's like building new words with Lego bricks.
Yeah.
You can take a root word like happy and add a prefix like to make unhappy, or a suffix like faithiness to make happiness.
Exactly. It's amazing how much you can do with just a few basic building blocks.
It makes vocabulary learning so much more engaging. It's not just about memorizing lists. It's about exploring the creative potential of language.
And that's what makes it fun. You start to see the patterns, the connections, the way words work together, and that's when it really starts to click.
It's like opening up a whole world of possibilities with every new word you learn.
And that's what we're going to help you do in this deep dive. We're going to give you the tools and strategies to unlock that world and make it your own.
So get ready to expand your vocabulary and boost your English fluency because we're just getting started.
And that's what we'll be exploring further practical techniques to make those building blocks work for you. Mastering English vocabulary can really open doors for you, especially in India, where it's so important for education and careers.
It's true. It's about more than just passing exams. It's about being able to express yourself confidently in any situation. So where do we begin? What are some effective strategies for building a strong vocabulary?
One of the simplest yet most powerful techniques is reading. When you read, you expose yourself to a wide range of vocabulary in different contexts.
I completely agree. But does it have to be boring textbooks all the time?
Not at all. Choose materials that interest you: novels, magazines, online articles, even comics. The key is to read regularly and actively pay attention to the words you encounter.
That makes sense. Reading something you enjoy makes the learning process much more enjoyable. It's like absorbing new words effortlessly while you're lost in a good story.
Exactly. And when you come across a new word, don't just gloss over it. Take a moment to look it up, understand its meaning, and try to use it in your own sentences.
So don't just let those new words sit passively in your notebook. Make them work for you.
Precisely. Active use is key to solidifying your vocabulary. Try incorporating those new words into your conversations, your writing, or even just your thoughts. The more you use them, the more natural they'll become.
It's like giving those words a workout. And speaking of workouts, I remember using flashcards when I was learning new languages. They were really helpful for memorizing vocabulary.
Flashcards are a classic technique for a reason. They're simple but effective. Write the word on one side and the definition in an example sentence or even a picture on the other side. Then quiz yourself regularly to reinforce your learning.
You can even make it fun by using different colors or drawing pictures on your flashcards. The more engaging they are, the better you'll remember the words.
Absolutely. And here's another fun technique: word games. Crossword Scrabble, even online word games, can be incredibly helpful. They challenge you to think about words in different ways and expand your vocabulary while having fun.
It's like sneaking in vocabulary practice without even realizing it. What other strategies would you recommend?
Keeping a vocabulary journal can be very beneficial. Whenever you encounter a new word that you find interesting or useful, write it down in your journal along with its definition, an example sentence, and any personal thoughts or connections you make.
It's like creating your own personalized dictionary. And you can look back on it and see how much your vocabulary has grown over time.
Exactly. It's a great way to track your progress and stay motivated. And speaking of progress, let's revisit the importance of context. Remember, understanding the context in which a word is used is crucial for grasping its meaning.
You're right. It's like being a detective, piecing together the clues to solve the mystery of the word. The surrounding words, the sentence, the overall situation, they all contribute to the word's meaning.
Precisely. And sometimes understanding a word's origin can also shed light on its meaning. That's where etymology comes in.
Oh, I love etymology. It's fascinating to trace a word back to its roots and see how its meaning has evolved over time. Do you have any interesting examples?
Of course. Did you know that the word salary comes from the Latin word for salt?
Really, I had no idea. How are they connected?
In ancient Rome, soldiers were sometimes paid in salt because it was a valuable commodity. So the word salary ultimately derives from the practice of paying people with salt.
That's incredible.
Ah.
It makes the word so much more meaningful when you know its history.
Exactly. Etymology can make vocabulary learning much more engaging and memorable. And while we're on the topic of making words stick, let's talk about pronunciation.
Pronunciation is so important, not just for sounding good, but for being understood. And as we mentioned earlier, those tricky stress patterns can really change the meaning of a word.
Absolutely. So practice pronouncing new words out loud, listen to native speakers carefully, and use those online dictionaries to make sure you're getting the stress right.
Those dictionaries are like having a pronunciation coach in your pocket. Now let's move on to another area that can be challenging, especially for Indian students spelling. English spelling is notorious for its inconsistencies.
It's true. There are silent letters, unusual combinations, and all sorts of exceptions to the rules. But don't be discouraged. There are techniques you can use to improve your spelling.
Like what? Any tips you can share?
One helpful tip is to break down words into smaller parts, focusing on prefixes, suffixes, and root words. This can make those long, intimidating words feel much more manageable.
That's a great strategy. It's like solving a puzzle, putting the pieces together to form the complete word.
Exactly. And remember, practice makes perfect. The more you read and write, the more familiar you'll become with English spelling patterns.
And don't be afraid to make mistakes. Mistakes are part of the learning process. Speaking of learning, let's talk about one of the most effective ways to acquire vocabulary learning words in phrases.
This is so crucial. As we mentioned earlier with collocations, words often appear together in specific combinations. So instead of just learning the word happy, learn phrases like happy birthday or happy to help.
That makes perfect sense. It's like learning the language in chunks rather than individual pieces.
Exactly. Learning words and phrases helps you sound more natural and fluent because you're using them in the way they're actually used in everyday speech and writing.
It's like learning the language the way native speakers do. Now let's talk about another powerful tool that can really boost your vocabulary, the thesaurus.
The thesaurus is a word lover's best friend. It's a treasure trove of synonyms and antonyms that can help you expand your vocabulary and express yourself more precisely.
It's like having a magic wand that transforms ordinary words into extraordinary ones.
Use it to find synonyms that convey subtle shades of meaning or to replace overused words with more interesting alternatives.
So instead of saying good all the time, I could use excellent or fantastic, depending on the context.
Exactly. The thesaurus helps you paint a richer and more vivid picture with your words. And remember, the more words you have at your disposal, the more powerful and nuanced your communication becomes.
This has been an incredible exploration of vocabulary building strategies.
Mhm.
I feel like I've gained so many practical tips that I can start using right away.
And remember, vocabulary acquisition is an ongoing journey. Keep exploring, stay curious, and enjoy the process.
So we've really dug deep into vocabulary learning, haven't we? I mean, it's amazing how many different approaches there are to help us master new words.
Yeah, and the best part is that many of these techniques are things you can easily fit into your daily routine.
Yeah.
It's not about cramming or making it a chore. It's about making vocabulary learning a habit, something you just do naturally.
It's really stuck with me is that learning new words isn't just about, memorizing definitions.
Yeah.
It's about getting those subtle shades of meaning, the little nuances that make each word special.
Exactly. It's about appreciating how rich and complex the English language truly is. And as Indian students, you guys have a unique advantage. Being exposed to multiple languages can actually make you better language learners.
That's so true. It's like having different perspectives, different ways of looking at the world of words. Now, before we wrap up, I want to remind everyone listening that mastering English vocabulary, it's a huge asset, especially in India. It opens doors for you.
It really does. It gives you the power to communicate your ideas clearly, to connect with people from all walks of life, and to confidently navigate a globalized world.
It's about finding your voice and letting it be heard. So as we come to the end of our deep dive, I want to leave you with something to think about, a challenge, if you will. Think of a word you've learned recently. What's its history? Its etymology. What are some interesting phrases it's a part of? And how can you use it in your own life?
Keep those dictionaries close by. Stay curious. And never stop exploring the fascinating world of words.
Thank you so much for joining us on this vocabulary adventure. We hope you've gained some valuable insights and feel inspired to keep expanding your word power. Remember, every new word you learn brings you one step closer to fluency and confidence in English.